harassment is committed by a small subset of males. Yeah. So it's not all men who do it. And I think most men would find it morally abhorrent to commit acts of sexual harassment in the workplace. But a subset of men do. And in the book, I identify what that subset is. It's men who are high on narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. They lack empathy, combined with a short-term mating strategy. And so what you have is these are dark triad men who pursue a short-term mating strategy that commit the vast majority of acts of sexual harassment and sexual coercion as well, including rape. And so it's not all men. So we have to get away from thinking all men and all women. It's a subset of men.
And when folks say things like, believe all women, I have a question, why? Really, why? Because I am inclined to believe stories of sexual abuse, I really am. But when folks say believe all women, you can't believe all women any more than you can believe all men or believe any other group of people. And to suggest that women are inherently more believable than men is sexist. To say that men don't deserve the same due process as women is sexist. And I believe that men shouldn't act like pigs. I've been only advocating this since I was a teenager. I'm the only man in America who was a virgin until I was married and proud of it. I've been advocating for a higher standard of traditional behavior on the part of men, literally my entire public career. But that doesn't mean that you get to carve out a section of crimes that don't require evidence.
For attractive women, is this, like, how big of a concern is sexual harassment? Like, none of you guys are working with Harvey Weinstein out here, but is it actually common for attractive women to actually be harassed in the workplace?
I would say yes.
Really?
Yeah. But with a caveat that it depends on the woman's comfort level, because harassment is subjective. So, for example, if you're sending me explicit messages, like, yes, that's a clear delineation of sexual harassment. But my brother actually had an instance where he was pulled into an HR situation, and he had just put his hand on the back of his assistant and said, can you tell them that I need 5 more minutes, to go tell the new clients, just give me a second. And that
innocent,
right? Yeah. So that was an incident. So I think it really just depends on what you deem sexual harassment, and I feel for guys sometimes, because how do you know where that line is? I don't know, that's subjective.
So when the Me Too movement came up last year, I remember reading through my news feed the day that it all happened and just thinking, well, here we fucking go. So a couple weeks ago, Ariana Huffington, so the owner of Huffington Post, posted 3 times as many male managers are now uncomfortable mentoring women in the wake of the Me Too movement. This is a huge step in the wrong direction. We need more men to #mentor her. The more important thing in this to me is mentor her. Really? Again, we are hijacking social issues to make them about women. Now, it really comes as no surprise that the PC brigade hasn't really caught up to the idea yet that women in the workplace are a liability. Now, it's probably not very fair, people will probably get very upset about it, but the reality is, it's actually the truth of the matter. Further, I am completely unsurprised that men are uncomfortable to be around women in the workplace. That's not surprising in any capacity. Why? Well, the first thing is that these movements, the Me Too movement, this push for a gynocentric workplace has really just created a framework that's basically impossible for people to work within. I mean, the main thing that I can see is that it's allowed victimhood and anxiety and stress to overtake normal social interaction, in addition to oversensitivity, but that's nothing new with the feminists. Yes, men and women work side by side, which is basically inevitable in a society where there are 2 genders, specifically 2, not more than that, just 2. The bigger issue is that these non-sexual harassment frameworks stretch so far and cover so many areas and are so ambiguous that it's hard to know when someone's going to get offended, someone's going to feel a particular way, and they're going to do something about it, whether or not they're actually in the right to do that. So I jumped on the Human Rights Commission website and went to the area that details what sexual harassment is in Australia. And there's a handful of them that I can reconcile, I can understand why it's on the list. But then there's a handful of them that I really don't understand. Staring or leering, intrusive questions or statements about your private life, and displaying posters, magazines, and screensavers of a sexual nature. The problem is that these terms are really ambiguous. How long does someone have to stare at someone else for that to be considered sexual harassment? Is it 4 seconds and then a woman gets offended and she can suddenly do something about it? Statements about your personal life? Like what? He asked me about my childhood. I think the reality is that it just sets up a workplace scenario where nobody wins. Having to consider every single social interaction you have with another person for fear of them misconstruing your actions, I don't think that's social progress. I think that's social regression. I think there's a massive difference between protecting women in the workplace and then also making them into social pariahs. This constant and ongoing push for not only equality but also for protection, particularly for females, it doesn't really help social interaction between men and women. What it does is make the whole thing a pretty oversensitive affair. It erodes respect, it creates a culture of hesitancy, and it also puts a lot of emphasis on social interaction where there was none there before. It makes it virtually impossible to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody of the opposite sex without fearing that it's going to come back and be something to do with sexual harassment. I just felt so harassed. He asked me to dinner and I said no, but he full insisted. No, he's your boss and it's the annual sales meeting and the only food that's going to be there are sandwiches. Oh, wow, he stared at me for way too long anyway. I think that all of this runs entirely contrary to this whole I am woman, hear me roar thing that's been adopted by the feminist movement, which is kind of not surprising in any capacity because most of third wave feminism is built upon victimhood. I find it really sad that in a lot of ways women are a liability in the workplace. Men lose their jobs regularly because of false allegations or unproven allegations or things that simply don't have any evidence to back them up. And what we've basically said is that we don't care about due process. We don't care about innocent till proven guilty because every single person that's accused of this stuff is stamped guilty and thrown away. And that's basically how we deal with these situations. Really, you just get fired. The worst part is that often when these allegations turn out to be false, there's no repercussions. No women lose their jobs over it. Oh, we just ruined the man's life, but that's absolutely fine, just as long as the woman wasn't really sexually assaulted. So I guess the reality is that when you create a society and a workplace that encourages victimhood, you just have people looking for reasons to be a victim.
Ladies, a man calling you babe or baby, sweetheart means nothing. A man buying you expensive gifts means nothing. A man becoming your baby father means nothing. A man moving in with you means nothing. A man taking you out to expensive dinners means nothing. Even a man taking you out clubbing every single weekend or vacations means jack shit. And let me not shock you. A man marrying you also means nothing. What truly means something is a man that genuinely respects, values, and supports you and changes himself, his lifestyle, and his ways just to keep you. That, my dear, is what truly means something. Real talk.
This is probably going to piss off a lot of people when I talk about this because I'm not saying that the Me Too movement wasn't necessary. I'm not saying that it wasn't an important topic to talk about. However, the women who were famous, who were talking about the Me Too movement, are the women who gave into the casting couch. They're the women that chose to go that way, and that's why they're famous. So they're not really gonna push that hard because at the end of the day, they've been rewarded for the choices they made. And I'm not saying that they can't be victims, and I'm not saying that there aren't situations and there aren't really bad people and that the men that actually did the things that they did shouldn't be held accountable. I'm not saying that at all. But these are the women that made the choices that they made to do these things to get fame, and that's the reason they're famous, and they don't want that illusion to be destroyed.
Let's not forget the woman that started the whole Me Too movement was the woman that was dating Anthony Bourdain when he killed himself. And the reason he killed himself because she was cheating on him. In addition to that, she was having sex with a 14-year-old boy. They paid the family hush hush money. Guess who paid that money? Anthony Bourdain. That's the woman that started the Me Too movement.
like, and nowadays, man, like with the way I've seen so many women weaponize Me Too against celebrities. Look at Johnny Depp, guys. Yeah. Look at the Johnny Depp case. What did she say? He raped her. He used to beat her ass. He was evil. He broke a bottle over her head. All this bullshit. Then Johnny Depp intelligently records the conversation in secret, and we find out that she was whooping his ass.
Yeah.
Like what?
And that was convincing in the beginning before she started losing heart.
We've been seeing a lot of these Me Too cases, they don't go criminal, they go civil. Why? Because when you go civil, their burden of proof is way less and you can make a bunch of money. So why are you gonna go the criminal route where you're gonna have to, be called to testify, you're gonna have to bring witnesses in, it's way more stressful, the burden of proof is higher, right? And you don't get paid. You don't get paid. So, a lot of these Me Too people, what are they doing? They're going ahead and they're going the civil route because the burden of proof is lower, the payout is higher, and a lot of the times the people that they're going after have a lot of money and they're just like, you know what, man, I'm just gonna settle. We saw this with Diddy. He wanted to fight it at first and then the lawsuit came, got hit in the news. What'd he do? Oh, never mind. I'm just gonna pay her the money, right?
People, including myself, only became aware of the Me Too movement in 2017 when Rose McGowan, a white wealthy woman who was a famous actress, brought it up. But it was actually started all the way back in 2006 by Tarana Burke, an African-American social activist. Women of color have been speaking up about sexual abuse in low-income workspaces for ages, but they never garnered the same attention as a rich white actress.
Well, isn't this awesome? Due to the hard work and efforts of feminism in the Me Too movement has made men not only be extra careful working with women in the workplace, but it is making men not even want to work with women.
There's been some backlash about Me Too and some anxiety, as you might imagine.
Many male managers and owners are feeling a little bit more tentative when working with and managing their female workers.
Listen to this. A side result, an unintended consequence of the Me Too movement has popped up. Male executives and managers, some are now saying they are afraid to work with and mentor female colleagues in the workplace. So we're trying to find out, is it too hard to see the difference between mentoring and harassment?
Listen, I can't give any more information. But I fear I may have girl bossed a bit too close to the sun.
A large percentage of male managers were concerned about working with women one-on-one in the workplace. They were concerned about mentoring women. They were saying they were afraid to have meetings with women, to travel with women, and so on. It indicates that there are anxieties and fears that we need to address.
Concern. And it's what's going to happen in hiring going forward.
Mark Yoseloff is the director of UNLV's School of Gaming and Innovation and hired hundreds of men and women as former CEO of Shufflemaster. He says this movement will make it tougher for women to get hired, especially when they're up against a qualified man.
They might elect to hire the man because they are concerned that down the road, whether they do anything wrong or not, there might be a she said, he said.
Yoseloff says current CEOs he knows have already opted not to sit in meetings alone with women in fear they would do something to spark a complaint.
It's a craziness that no executive wants to have to face.
Earlier this year, I had the displeasure of dealing with a female coworker harassing a male coworker. A male subordinate comes to me to report the female subordinate. She decided that she wanted his opinion on fellatio techniques. She asked him because he's openly gay. I went with him to HR to report. HR calls everyone involved to get their side. At this point, the female employee realizes the male employee snitched and begins bad-mouthing him. HR hands down punishment based on zero tolerance policy. 3 days unpaid suspension for the male victim, but only 1 day unpaid suspension to the female employee because she's pregnant and we can't cause too many problems. The male employee came back from suspension with legal representation. The female employee came back and all the male employees avoided her and any situation where they would need to be alone with a female employee.
So a paper came out recently that looked at the impact of the Me Too movement on academia, and it actually shows that post-Me Too, women's productivity fell largely due to fewer collaborations with male researchers. The paper shows that this drop is most pronounced at universities where the perceived risk of sexual harassment accusations is highest. So the actual findings comparing research before and after the movement are right here, and as you can see, after the Me Too movement, collaborations with male researchers inside the same institution fell to close to zero. The author points out that men feel like if they accidentally say the wrong thing, they could be canceled or fired. She also notes that institutions that have clear policies on sexual harassment help reduce this perceived risk. And this isn't just in academia. The paper also cites a 2018 study which showed that 60% of male managers are uncomfortable participating in common activities with women due to the same concerns. And a curious finding of the study was that men make up for the loss in this collaboration by just collaborating more with other men, whereas women don't make up for it at all. The author concludes her findings by saying that Me Too was important for raising awareness, but it's also increasingly important for institutions to have really clear sexual harassment guidelines.
The Me Too movement has become big enough to encompass everything and diffuse enough to risk becoming nothing at all. As it descends the ladder from rape to bad dates, it's becoming a category big enough to be meaningless. 4 months ago, we learned the shocking news about Harvey Weinstein. Soon after, we heard about more monsters in everyday places. The Me Too hashtag took off and a movement was formed. More women came forward, more powerful men were fired. But just as quickly, some men were unfairly caught in the crossfire. Matt Damon said that groping someone's butt was different from sexually molesting a child. The mob said he was callous, misinformed, and part of the problem. An anonymous woman described a disappointing date with Aziz Ansari, and suddenly, bad hookups were added to the list. Some women said the problem was the male power structure itself, and soon smashing the patriarchy was added to the long list of goals. It seemed that almost every woman had some kind of experience or goal that she wanted to add to the agenda. No problem was too small or too vague to be included, so long as a man was to blame. The women's movement in America began at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, and it also included a long list of goals. Soon enough, leaders focused on one goal: suffrage. It was a reckoning, a watershed moment, and it changed the country forever. If Me Too is going to change America, it needs to focus on its original and most serious goal: ending the kind of workplace sexual harassment that has plagued women ever since they entered the workforce.
Now, here's a quick one about a gal who she, as well as her female coworkers, are having a meltdown because a guy at work isn't paying attention to them. And as I say, women, they need attention and validation the same way plants need sunlight and water, and how if a guy rejects them, either rejects their advances, doesn't pay attention to them, they lose their freaking minds. Title: A colleague at work, a 27-year-old male of 1 year, refuses to socialize with me, a 24-year-old female, or any of the women in our office. Oh, the travesty. There are plenty of other horrible things going on in the world, but nothing is as horrible as a guy, God forbid, not paying attention to you and your friends. She says here, "Hi all. I'm posting this on alternative site because I know a few of my friends are following me on here, and I don't want this spilling out until I have some clear thoughts on what I want to do." Oh, you're trying to say you don't want any drama because something tells me you like drama. So early last year, our firm hired Dan, a 27-year-old male. In the first few weeks, he was really quiet and didn't talk much, and that's just how we thought he was. Every conversation with him was short and to the point and never deviated from work, aside from pleasantries, have a nice weekend, etc. About 2 months ago, he started becoming a bit more friendly with the guys in our office, and they would hang out every so often after work and have normal conversations. Isn't it interesting that she and her friends are really paying close attention to what this guy's doing? However, whenever any of the girls in the office try to do so, he would quickly change the conversation back to just work or not reply. Even now, after a year of Dan working with us, he straight up refuses to socialize with the girls in the office, and he's making them feel uncomfortable. Oh, now he's the bad guy. He's making us feel uncomfortable. Maybe he's sticking to business. Maybe he's worked at a place where the girls act like it's high school and wants nothing to do with that. Or maybe he's become very RP'd, understands about Mgtow, things like that, knows the Mike Pence rule, and he's doing that for a good reason. But he's making you uncomfortable. He avoids any discussion of himself outside of work-related events and future plans and doesn't ask any of the girls either. Aware as he is, what can I only assume, pretty good friends with the guys in the office. Even on work meals out to celebrate events, he's only doing the bare minimum when it comes to conversation with the girls, where again with the guys, he talks to them like there is no problem whatsoever. I don't know if I'm overreacting. You sure about that? But one of the girls is considering going to HR about this because she is saying it's creating a hostile work environment. Dan treats us like he treats clients we work with, cordial and strictly about business, and it's wearing thin now. Any advice is appreciated. Okay, she asked for advice, so I'll give some advice. You and your friends need to grow the F up. You're 24 years old, so I'm assuming all the female coworkers are probably in the 20s. We all know what generation they're in between the Z-tards and the millennials, and she's certainly behaving like a bunch of Z-tards and millennials. Your work is a place of business to earn a paycheck to pay for your living expenses or to build a career, not high school. But she's acting like it's high school. If this guy doesn't want to talk to you, that's his business. He probably has experience where BS goes on, gossiping and drama and turmoil, which you're creating, drama, and wants nothing to do with it. And given how you're acting here and saying that it's a unpleasant work environment or some BS like that and thinking about going to HR, gee, you wonder why he doesn't want to talk to you. Problem is this, you can't handle the fact that a guy doesn't want to pay attention to you, that a guy isn't flirting with you, asking you out and all that, and it's driving you freaking crazy.
Hi, I'm Andrew, and you brought up how like the male ads show that like we are scum, essentially. You said that.
Yeah.
And there was that Gillette ad about a year or two ago where it talked about the whole thing was about toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
More specifically, there was that one clip where there was those two men on the street, and then one of the guys was like a girl walked past, and the guy was gonna go after, not like go after her, but like he was gonna follow her and like whatever, ask her out or whatever. And then that one guy stopped him and said, "Whoa, man, you don't want to do that." So, what do you think like that effect has, or what effect do you think that has on like boys like trying to ask girls out is like toxic? Like what effect do you think that will have on like boys? Like, do you think it will make boys more like awkward in trying to like communicate with women? Or?
Yeah, I think this is something that we can thank the Me Too movement for as well, in part. That, you know, yes, we should obviously be respectful of women. That commercial is interesting because I know that one scene you're talking about where the attractive woman walks by, the other guy is going to it looks like he's just going to go up and try to talk to her, and then the dude is like, "Hey, dude, no. Yeah. Wrong. Yeah. It's like, what? Why is that wrong? It's wrong to go talk to a woman. I can't even do that. So it's a subtle thing in that commercial, but that does seem to be the message that you hear from feminists, that oftentimes, you know, if you're propositioning a woman, even in the sense of just asking for a date, and she's not interested, then that could be harassment. You could be harassing her. And I think it does make it very difficult for, you know, normal interactions between the sexes to take place.
So when the Me Too movement came up last year, I remember reading through my news feed the day that it all happened and just thinking, well, here we fucking go. So a couple weeks ago, Ariana Huffington, so the owner of Huffington Post, posted 3 times as many male managers are now uncomfortable mentoring women in the wake of the Me Too movement. This is a huge step in the wrong direction. We need more men to #mentor her. The more important thing in this to me is mentor her. Really? Again, we are hijacking social issues to make them about women. Now, it really comes as no surprise that the PC brigade hasn't really caught up to the idea yet that women in the workplace are a liability. Now, it's probably not very fair, people probably get very upset about it, but the reality is, it's actually the truth of the matter. Further, I am completely unsurprised that men are uncomfortable to be around women in the workplace. That's not surprising in any capacity. Why? Well, the first thing is that These movements, the Me Too movement, this push for a gynocentric workplace has really just created a framework that's basically impossible for people to work within. I mean, the main thing that I can see is that it's allowed victimhood and anxiety and stress to overtake normal social interaction, in addition to oversensitivity. But that's nothing new with the feminists. Yes, men and women work side by side, which is basically inevitable in a society where there are two genders, specifically two, not more than that, just two. The bigger issue is that these non-sexual harassment frameworks stretch so far.
And that wraps up today's episode of Manosphere Daily. If you enjoyed the content, give it a like. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're notified as soon as a new video is out. Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you all tomorrow.